With Store Showdown season coming to a close, and us and everyone revving up for Set 2, Shadows of the Galaxy for Star Wars Unlimited, it's time for us to finalize our Set 1 decks in preparation to switch everything up and change everything with the brand new meta that is on the horizon of this card game. That's why I wanted to get this final list out for Luke Skywalker. I've gotten way more experience in playing a plethora of different matchups, and I actually took it to another second place finish at JAF Comics in Bethlehem with just how the deck performed throughout the day in various matchups against Sabine, Iden mid-range, and control decks. Not only do I feel like this Luke Cunning list is in a final state for Set 1, but I also feel like this Luke list is Tier 1. I don't feel like I have any bad matchups. In fact, I have a clear game plan for every single matchup. Let's get into the guide video. Greetings Internet, DDA here, and this is by far my favorite Luke Skywalker list in this set. I just have so much fun playing it. Just how many different avenues of play it has. It's so freaking fun to play and so powerful. I had so many people at the Store Showdown yesterday tell me how they were just not expecting this level of power to come from Luke Skywalker. And I think a lot of that power comes from Luke's lightsaber. I think Luke's lightsaber is often slept on, and seeing it in action when you attach it to Luke Skywalker, seeing some of the combos you can do with it to heal him and shield him and make him a 7/8 is incredibly powerful for only 2 resource. But I did want to make one clarification. If you watch my previous video on this Luke list, I think I may have made it seem like it was a mill deck. This is not a mill deck. This is not a control deck. It's not a mill deck. This is an aggro deck that also passively mills the opponent. The passive mill that it does it without even trying. It's not a major game plan of the deck. This is an aggro deck, and you will win 95% of your games by base damage, mostly from Luke Skywalker leader, and then, other units like Falcon, Kanan, and whatnot. But mostly it's coming from Luke Skywalker leader, killing the opponent's base very, very quickly, swinging for 7 to 10 damage. That's the main strategy of the deck. And then, but in the mill matchup, what will happen is 3 of the modes of vigilance become relevant in the mill matchup because you're putting so much base pressure on them. They need to kill a unit, and they usually need to heal. But because you're also passively milling them, the 6 mill also becomes a relevant choice because they have to usually catch up in mill. So you're putting them in a very awkward position where they want to choose 3 of the 4 modes in vigilance, and it makes the matchup very interesting. Now, I actually did get to a point yesterday against a mill deck where I did mill them out, and I actually just barely lost that game via mill. Very, very close. I kind of misplayed in it, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that it's a possible mode of victory against these decks. And, mid-range decks often struggle against control decks. So to have that option for a mid-range deck to mill out a control deck is very, very powerful. So let's get into the guide. I made several changes from my initial list. And I'm actually starting out with the biggest change that I made from my initial list. And that is we completely dropped R2-D2. And we dropped 1 chopper to do 2 chopper and 2 Greedo. Now, the reason that we do this is because this helps in the aggro matchup. It helps very much in the aggro matchup because you can either drop Chopper and Greedo turn 1. You can also do like Leia Greedo or Leia Chopper turn 1 against aggro to get a lot of power on the board. And then likewise, it just helps you to flood the board against like mid-range and control decks, putting a lot of power on the board with Greedo. Greedo is not great against some control decks. Like Vader, he can ping him off really easily. You have to play around that. And likewise, other control decks that are like running Make an Opening can be really detrimental to you for them to kill and heal as well. But he is very strong in the aggro match. But But I only wanted to run 2 of them because, again, there are some scenarios and some certain matchups that Greedo is not the greatest, but he is strong enough to be in here as a 2. And I like the 2 and 2 spread. Chopper is extremely powerful. I'm seeing some Luke lists out there that are not running Chopper. I think that's a mistake. He's incredibly powerful in the mid-range matchup, and he enables the mill strategy against the control and mill decks. So I would not take Chopper out. I think he's incredible and will win you some games. But Greedo did work in here because of the aggro matchup. We are still on 3 Leia Organas. Very powerful unit. I mentioned that there are 2 different turn 1. There are many turn 1 plays you can do with Leia. You can drop her as a 2/2 shielded. You could turn 1 Leia Greedo, turn 1 Leia Chopper. I've done all 3 of those to great success. Great unit. Tap down leaders, tap down Boba, tap down Vader, tap down Han, win the game. Still running 3 Restored Arcs. Great unit, solid unit. Not much more to say about it. It's a 3 damage swing in the air. It's a great unit. And we'll be in here for a while. Just a standard, a solid bread and butter unit there. Also still running the 3 Lothal Insurgents. Great card. Of course, Make an Opening is always a card that you got to watch out for. Like a 2/4 shielded. There are some 2/4 shielded units out there that are coming into the meta. So this doesn't line up the greatest. A lot of times I do, like let's say I have a Restored Arc in my hand and a Lothal. I'll drop the Restored Arc turn 1, so that way I can shield the Lothal. I do like dropping him with a shield on turn 2. I do that a lot. So that's something to keep in mind with him, that he is better with the shield just to give him a little bit more resilience. Worthy to note that there. Still running 3 Ezra Bridgers. This guy is just, it's cornerstone to the deck. The more I play him, the more I think he really shines in the control matchup. He's good in the aggro matchup, but in the control matchup especially, getting that extra card draw can be very, very paramount to your victory against control. Especially if you play like a low-cost unit, like a Greedo or a Leia or a Lothal or something like that off the top. Playing that low-cost unit can be incredibly powerful, just in general, against control. So yeah, Ezra Bridger, not going anywhere here. Pretty standard card. Just the card draw is so amazing. Plus the synergy with Chopper and Kanan is great as well. We also are still on the 2 Yodas. Now, I said in my previous video that some people go down on Yoda, but some people like him. I think I figured out why some people don't like him, specifically in the aggro matchup. In the aggro matchup, he's actually best when you are lane dodging the aggro match. So, like, if you're in an aggro match and they are going heavy in space, and then you drop Yoda, because then they don't really have a good answer, especially if they're not running ECL. Like, if you're playing, like, Blonde Sabine, and they're going heavy in space, you drop Yoda as an answer to that. Like, let's say you don't have a direct answer to the A-Wing, you don't have a direct answer to Falcon. The damage that you can offset with Yoda is kind of a soft answer to that if you can't directly answer the space threats, because just the numbers are really high with Yoda. The problem with Yoda in the aggro matchup is that a lot of early game units can trade into him. Like, for example, K2. A lot of early game units can trade into him, kill Yoda, and then survive. And it puts you in a really bad spot. So he's good in the aggro match when you're lane dodging. He's also really good into the control match because you know they're going to answer all your units. Like, they're literally just going to kill all of your units. It almost doesn't even matter what you play. They're going to kill your units. So it's great to just drop Yoda because you know that they're going to kill it, and then you get a card draw out of it. And so I'll often do that. Like, let's say I have Kanan and Yoda in my hand. I will drop Yoda in the control matchup just because I know they're going to kill him, and then I get a card draw, and then next turn I can drop Ezra with a shield. So Yoda, I think he's great at 2. He's especially strong with the Force is with me, which we did work into this list, as you can see. So really powerful with the Force is with me. Just great overall card. I think he's excellent at 2. 2 copies. 3 Fleet Lieutenants have been so cornerstone to this deck. You know, trading up with Chopper, trading up with Restored Arc in space to take out an A-Wing, doing 9 damage with Luke. There are so many things that make Fleet Lieutenant amazing. It's an amazing card. I would play 6 of it if I could. Playing Fleet Lieutenant makes me want to play Wing Leader, but Wing Leader is not Fleet Lieutenant. Fleet Lieutenant is honestly just way better than Wing Leader. Fleet Lieutenant is just so freaking powerful. I wish I had more of this card in this deck. 3 Kanan Jarrus. Cornerstone to this deck. I've gotten so much mill, so much heal from this guy. I've gotten better at playing him. Now that I know that my opponent is always going to kill him, I've gotten better at playing him, at presenting multiple threats on the board. Greedo is good at doing that, because Greedo will help you clear the board. So like against aggro, what you can do is you can clear a lot of the board with Greedo. Like an early game Greedo, and then get your Kanan out there, get him to stick, and sticking a Kanan against aggro will absolutely win you the game, because he is pretty much a 6 damage swing every turn. Plus you can trade with him. Like it's really easy to kill Sabine Leader with Kanan. Very easy to do that. Just an incredible unit. Amazing card. Doing this out of order a little bit because this is 3-drop as well with Millennium Falcon. Cornerstone to the deck. I've had several people ask me if you can play this deck without Millennium Falcon. Yes, you can play this deck without Millennium Falcon. Millennium Falcon is better for your aggro game because this is an aggro deck. This is a mid-range deck, but it's on the line between mid-range and aggro. It really is heavily aggressive, and Falcon plays into that perfectly. But however, the 1 resource cost does get very taxing, especially on the Luke deploy turn, where you would kind of want to either Cunning or Vigilance or do a double 3-drop play. It gets very taxing, especially on the 4 turn as well. Like on the 4 resource turn, paying that extra resource. The turn after Falcon really hurts because you can't drop a 4-drop then. So that's where Azatuk can come in for you and fill this slot. You won't have that problem of paying the resource, but you will be a little bit slower because, you know, Falcon comes out a turn earlier and is ready, whereas Azatuk comes out a turn later and can't attack the base. It can only attack a unit. So it does fill that role, and you can pull it off, but you'll just be more of a control. Like you're pushing the line towards more control versus aggro, where Falcon is a very aggressive card. But great card. I've won many games with Falcon. Another major change we made to the deck is we dropped Obi-Wan Kenobi for Chewbacca. And this was an excellent change. After playing many games with Chewbacca instead of Obi-Wan, I think it's excellent. Also, we dropped Sneak Attack. So after dropping Sneak Attack, it was hard to justify Obi-Wan Kenobi because it was easier to combo Obi-Wan Kenobi's death, experience, and draw with Sneak Attack. There are just a lot of problems with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's so easy to play around, so susceptible to like waylay, and yeah, you know, Chewbacca has some of the same problems, but paying 6 resource, like waiting that extra turn is the big thing. So I found against aggro, you usually die by 6 resource, and that's a problem for a Luke deck, right? Because you come out on 6. So you need to slow them down before Luke comes out. You really need to slow them down on the 5 turn, and that's where Chewbacca comes in. But also, you have to ask yourself, what's better? Is playing a 4/6 Sentinel better on 6, or playing a 3/6 shielded Sentinel on 6? That's close, right? especially if you're throwing the Sentinel into a naked board, like with no other units on the board. Obi-Wan is very scary to do that, and that will often happen in the aggro match, because you have to trade your early game units to slow them down as much as you can. So often you will not have units, and that's where Chewbacca comes in strong. Especially if you can shield him with Luke, like not only with Luke power, but also with Luke unit on deploy. The other interaction that makes Chewbacca better, also Chewbacca is more of an aggressive Sentinel, right? Because you can get that 3 damage into the base a lot of times. He's more of an aggressive Sentinel versus like the combo slow nature of Obi-Wan. The other combo that makes Chewbacca better than Obi-Wan, in my opinion, is we just kind of talked about it right with Falcon, how that 1 resource cost gets kind of taxing. Well, that makes us really want a 5-drop going into the Luke deploy turn. We really want that 5-drop. And that often was a problem with Obi-Wan, because is Obi-Wan good enough to bounce Falcon? Especially since you're losing a unit on board that could potentially get that experience. Falcon may be your only unit on the board to get that experience. So if you're bouncing him to your hand, you're put in a really precarious situation here. It's tough. Whereas with Chewie, you can keep the Falcon in play, pay the resource, and then still have 5 to drop Chewbacca. There are many, many, many reasons why I feel like Chewbacca, and he performed so much better than Obi-Wan. I think this is one of the best changes. Like, the 2 best changes I made to the deck, hands down, were adding Greedo for the aggro matchup, and then adding Chewbacca for also the aggro matchup, because Obi-Wan was not good against aggro, because they just spec force him and then just ignore him. Whereas Chewbacca comes out a turn earlier, and they may spec force him the turn you drop him, but then next turn, usually you can live into the 6th turn, then next turn he will be online. Closing out the endgame units, we have 3 Luke Skywalker. You will not get here again in every match, but the matches that you do get here against mid-range and control decks, this unit is paramount. You will want to hold off for a while on playing him until you get a very key unit kill. You want to make sure he sticks around. It's even better if you do it on like the 8 resource turn and you can shield him, or you have Luke leader in play and you can shield him. Very, very powerful to shield this unit with Luke. Double Luke. Just an incredible unit. He wins games when he sticks on the field. So just getting him to stick on the field will win you the game. And then we went to a single copy of Redemption. Without the sneak, Redemption is just really slow. So we don't get here a lot. So without sneak attack, we don't need the 2 copies. It felt good. It feels good at 1. We do have the 2nd copy in the sideboard, so that is there for you. But it is a solid unit. It kind of helps you offset the damage. You won't get here against aggro, but against mid-range matchups, it will help you kind of seal out the last little bit of damage you need. Like seal out, like you just take 8 damage, do the 8 heal on your base, and then it's very, very hard for them to outrace you at that point. So going into the events, we are still on 3 surprise strikes. Just very, very key for the base race, showing the aggressive nature of this deck. Most of the events in this deck add damage. So that is the big thing with yellow, right? Like, you're playing tricks and you're playing damage pumps. And this deck is incredibly aggressive. You push out a ton of damage. It can play a control-y game and like a field control-y game, especially with the shielding. Shielding allows you to trade units very, very effectively. So you can do that, but mostly you want to go for face. And the number 1 face card in the game is Surprise Strike. I talked about it earlier. 3 Luke's lightsaber. If you're playing Luke Skywalker and not playing Luke's lightsaber, you are making a mistake. I promise you. You see, most of the green lists are running Luke's lightsaber as their only equipment, and there's a reason for that. It's incredible. Like, it's good to put on early game units to get that extra damage. Putting it on Leia is something I did a lot. Like, I'll turn 1 Leia drop, give Leia a shield, and then throw a Luke's lightsaber on her to make her a 5/3 shielded and just start swinging into base for 5. I did that against aggro decks to race them. You can out-race aggro decks by doing that. You know, hitting for 5 every turn and then blowing them out with a Cunning. Very, very strong card. Just incredible. You know, I talk about how Luke does 7 damage. Luke often does 7 damage because you are attaching Luke's lightsaber to Luke Skywalker. Coming in with more events, we are still on 3 Spark of Rebellions. This is becoming one of the best cards in the set, in my opinion. I think it was Old Boys, New Toys, a smaller YouTube channel, but I've seen some of their videos. I appreciate their personality. You know, they came out and they said that Spark of Rebellion was the best card in the set. And I kind of laughed at them for that in the beginning, but the more I play it, the more I'm agreeing. This is just such an incredible card. Even in aggro matchups, it's starting to really win out for me. Like, it's not the best aggro play always, but if you take away units, and that's the big thing with this, like, being that we're an aggressive deck and we want to kill the opponent, usually it's best to take out their units because then we could just kind of take over the field. And yeah, they may 1-for-1 us with removal, but we can kind of flood the board more effectively than a lot of other decks can. We play a lot of 1-drops. So taking out their units ends up being the better play with this most of the time. Obviously against control decks, like you want to rip the Super Laser or maybe rip the Overwhelming Barrage depending on the situation, depending on the board state. But even like Overwhelming Barrage, like Luke Skywalker, a lot of the times counters Overwhelming Barrage with the shielding. So a lot of times you can make Overwhelming Barrage almost completely ineffective against you. And I was talking to some of the Green Villain players after the tournament, and they said to me that they were actually resourcing Overwhelming Barrage against me because I would shield all my units and then it would literally do nothing for them. So keep that in mind. It's not always best to choose events with this card. A lot of times it's better to choose units. Another big change that we made, dropping Sneak Attack and the single redemption and working in 3 waylays. 3 waylays in this deck has been paramount, mostly against mid-range decks, slowing them down. Against aggro decks, slowing them down, like bouncing Dodonna, bouncing K2. K2 is a big one to bounce. Bouncing anything with a wing leader. A lot of people are still trying to wing leader certain units, and just waylaying them will just win you the game. Really great card. Needed for the mid-range matchup and needed as a counter to equipment and experience decks. After I lost the 2 games against Tarkin at Red Caps, I added in 2 to 3 waylays to the main deck, and it's just been working out so well. This is a key card to help you in the aggro matchup to slow them down, right? Because all we need to do is slow them to the Luke deploy turn. That's all we need to do, and waylay helps you do that. So I had a lot of people ask me about the forces with me in this deck, and the forces with me has been in and out so much of this list. I did manage to work in 1 copy of the forces with me, just because it's so much cost. We play so many other pumps in this deck, and then likewise, it needs to line up. Like, yes, you can play it without a force unit in play, just to get the 2 experience and swing, and certainly if you're winning the game off that, or if you're doing an incredible trade, that can work out for you. However, it is way better with the shield. It's way better. The main reason why I wanted to work this in is because on the Luke deploy turn, you can Luke's lightsaber and then the forces with me, Luke, for 9 damage and give him 2 shields. And if you do that, like if you 9 damage someone and then double shield him, you pretty much win. Like they can't come back from that. And then likewise, Waylay can back you up if they drop Sentinels, because that's what will happen a lot of times. Like, you'll build up Luke to be huge, and then they'll drop Sentinels. Well, then you just waylay those Sentinels, and then you just win the game. Forces with me, I think it's good. Most I would play would be 2. It felt good at 2. I think it's going to feel even better at 1, just to kind of be that I win the game randomly card. Need I say more? This is probably the best card in Spark of Rebellion. Cunning. has just been key. Every single matchup. Every single matchup. There isn't a matchup where I take out Cunning. 3 in this deck always. Because it's so powerful. Like, it'll swing the entire board against aggro. Against control, you do the random discard. Against Han, you do the random discard. The random discard has been key in so many matchups to limit people's options, rip out those answers. The +4 wins me games. Like, I won, I think it was... Yeah, I want to say it was the top 8 match. Top 8 yesterday at JAF against Iden Green. I double Cunninged him to random discard and +4 my Falcon. He had the ground arena locked down with Sentinels. And I +4'd and random discarded twice my Falcon to win the game. Very strong. Cunning, just the versatility of it in different matchups just wins the game. And we are at a single copy of Vigilance now. We dropped from 2. I just found, like, in the aggro match, it's pretty slow in aggro. And Cunning kind of fills that role against aggro. Like, Cunning is a bigger blowout. Vigilance can only save you, like, 8 damage. 8 to, at most, 9 or 10 damage. Whereas, like, Cunning can save you, like, 15 damage. Like, 10 to 15 damage. So, like, Cunning is a bigger blowout against aggro. That's why I felt like Vigilance was okay at 1. Like, it's good to run the 4, so that way you always drop a 6-drop card against aggro. Always. Like, on that 6th turn, you're either doing Cunning or Vigilance, which is very, very key against aggro to do one of those. And then the single copy again of Vigilance in the mill matchup is very key, because you don't need a lot of mill against them. However, doing that single mill for 6 will win you the game against the mill decks. Very strong. I only felt like I needed 1 of it, so that's why you only see 1 in the main deck, and I dropped all of them out of the side. There was never a time where I was really adding Vigilance, ever. Like, even against aggro, like I said, like, running 5 of the 6 cost events felt too much. It felt too slow against aggro. So I felt like I needed to drop it down. Like, Waylay is all you really need to slow down the game to get you to the loop deploy to win. So, yep. But the single copy of Vigilance has just been excellent against aggro and excellent against the mill decks. But against other control decks or mid-range, I'm usually taking it out. Now, to go into the sideboard, I know a lot of people ask, like, what I take out and what I put in against aggro matches and mid-range and control. So I'm gonna do this the best I can. So I'm gonna try to go into it, okay? So against aggro, you're going to add the 2 bamboozles and then usually the Greedo. That's usually what I'm adding against aggro, and none of the other cards, like, so none of the other 7. Now, what I take out against aggro is I usually drop Redemption. I'll take out the Redemption, and I'm usually dropping 2 Spark of Rebellions. So because the Spark can work out against aggro, but it can be a trap also, because if, like, you spark them and they have 2 unit plays and you can't actually slow them down, you can really hurt yourself by sparking. So it's kind of a risky play to spark an aggro deck unless it's late game. So late game sparks against aggro are good because you can usually rip, like, Heroic Sacrifice or For a Cause or something like that. So that's why I dropped 2 sparks for Bamboozle. Bamboozle is very key against aggro decks, especially because you can play it for free, which I have done against aggro several times. So that's usually what I'll take out. So 2 sparks for Bamboozle and then 1 redemption for a Greedo, just to have that extra Greedo for the aggro match. Now against mid-range, I usually won't add the Bamboozle unless they're an equipment deck or they are a deck with a ton of experience, like a Chirrut or something like that. Deck with a ton of experience. But against mid-range, usually what I'm putting in is I'm putting in Chopper, I'm putting in Redemption, and I'm putting in maybe like 1 Vanquish or 2 depending. Like, so against like Villain, Green, mid-range, I'll maybe put in 2 Vanquish because their top end is so insane. So against like yellow mid-range, I'll take out like one Luke's lightsaber because you definitely don't want a Luke's lightsaber in early game unit because they'll waylay it. I'll also drop the vigilance in the mid-range matchup because it's not great into mid-range. I'll sometimes drop maybe one waylay depending. See, a lot of this, like, people are asking like advanced sideboard techniques, but the problem is you really need to adjust on the fly. That's why it's hard for me to tell you, because like I can't give you definitives. Like, there are so many different types of mid-range decks, right? So like if I give you absolute rules, you're going to get into situations where you should not follow those rules. So in general though, I would consider dropping vigilance. I would consider maybe dropping one waylay, but maybe not depending on the matchup. I would consider dropping one Luke's lightsaber if they were yellow mid-range. I would also consider dropping maybe one Chewbacca depending on the mid-range deck. It really, really depends on how they play, their curve, you know, if they focus more on space or ground. Like, all this stuff depends, so you really need to adjust on the fly. But that's in general what I would do. And then against the control deck, I do something very interesting. I flood. Now, okay, so it depends on the type of control deck. So if it's like Palpatine, if it's non-blue control, against any blue control deck, so I'll do blue control decks. Against blue control decks, I will just flood. And I will put in all of these. So I'm flooding units, right? I'm adding both Greedo and Chopper. And let me tell you, I didn't mention this before, but the Greedo and Chopper to fill out the 3-3 in the sideboard had been so beautiful in the tournament. The number of times that I added either Greedo or Chopper in certain matchups, or both, to go the 3-3 specifically in the blue villain control matchup, because what you want to do in the blue villain control matchup is you want to flood the board, because you have Spark and Bodhi's to stop the super laser. So usually you can stop the super laser like with a combination of Spark and Bodhi and the single copy of Regional Governor we have in here. So you can usually stop the super laser. So you just then, otherwise you just want to flood the board to protect your Luke leader from Power of the Dark Side. As long as you stop the super laser and then you play around Power of the Dark Side and entrenched on Luke, you can win the game with Luke leader pretty definitively. And then if they manage to kill your Luke leader, then that's when you would switch to a more of the mill game. So what are you taking out for all this stuff against control, right? What are you taking out? Well, waylays usually come out for me because waylay isn't great against control. I've actually been siding out some surprise strikes because it's hard to keep units on the board. I'll usually keep in maybe one surprise strike, but generally taking out events for units in the control matchup is good. I would also consider dropping the forces with me for the same reason of surprise strike, because it's just hard to get units to stick. So what am I at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I think I add 7. So that's 7 for 7. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty much this. Like, so I'll keep the Luke's lightsabers in because you want to try to kill control decks with Luke leader. Definitely keep the sparks, and then likewise keep the Cunnings for the random discard and the vigilance for the mill. And then you're taking out a bunch of events and adding in a bunch of units, adding in the vanquishes to answer the Avenger. And that's pretty much it. And that's how you're gonna sideboard. That's because, like I said, I can't give you a 100% definitive plan because you have to really adjust on the fly and decide based on what's going on. But like I said, I think this deck, I don't feel like it has bad matchups. That's why I feel like it's tier 1. Like, there isn't a matchup where I'm afraid. I'm not afraid of any matchup. There's none. Because like Boba, you just slow down the game. Boba, you just slow down the game, and your top end is better. Luke unit answers Fire Spray. You can Waylay Fire Spray. You can Redemption Fire Spray. You can Vanquish it. Like, you have tons of answers for Fire Spray. And then, like, you have so many options. You can Cunning. Cunning blows out the Boba matchup. He can't handle your Luke leader. Like, yeah, he has No Good to Me Dead, but you have Spark, and yeah, it's just there. I feel like Spark makes it so you have no bad matchups. So if you love Luke Skywalker and you like playing incredibly powerful, like swinging for base for 7, for 10, for 9, this is the deck for you. It plays aggressive. It can pivot towards more of a control game. It's one of the most versatile decks I played. So fun. Going into set 2, I can't wait to play this deck more. So if you like this video, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe for all the best gaming content and guides. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for weekly updates on Star Wars Unlimited.